Hey, I'm Jeff Miles, and I'm joined right now by Glenn Johnson, who is the host of the Manumet Podcast. You can find it online at themanumetpodcast.com. I encourage you to go and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like all the different episodes. We're going to be talking about so many different things as far as your retirement, your future, how to take what could be a great time right now and make it even better. And Glenn, we talked about that in the last podcast, and a lot of people are probably feeling that very same way. And Glenn, I want to start today with something that's going on in my life personally. It's not me specifically as far as the retirement aspect is concerned, but it has to do with my mother-in-law who just came to visit us, and she's been with us now for about a week or so. Okay. She has questions about retirement. And I was like, well, interestingly enough, I talk to people who have a lot to say about this. So I'll start by saying this. My mother-in-law is 69 years old, and she is faced in a season of her life where she wants to move closer to family. And she has questions about the best way to go about making that move as it pertains to selling her house, as it pertains to what to do with the proceeds after she sells her house, where to, move certain monies to make sure that wherever she ends up, she is set up for, again, success down the road financially. And I'll tell you that she lives in an area of Texas. She lives in El Paso, Texas. She has a home that she has built plenty of equity in. She actually owns the house outright.
Great.
So now she's thinking, I want to sell this house. And is this a good time for me to try to sell this house? And if I do so, where do I go from there? And how do I make sure that I'm able to hold on to as much money as I possibly can with regards to, is it going to affect even my Social Security? Is it going to affect even some of the withdrawals from other accounts as I, make this change in my life?
Okay. That's a great question.
Threw you a curveball there, huh?
Well, the situation's not uncommon, yeah. but as you know, there's a tremendous amount of variables with this.
Right.
Essentially, how do you go about making complex decisions when there's so much at stake and there's so many different things to consider?
Right.
There is no specific answer to say, oh, well, she should just do this.
Right.
So what matters is the process of how do you go about deciding what you're going to do next. And I like to look at it this way. You've got to start with defining exactly how it is that you want to live. Where do you want to live? What time do you want to wake up? Who do you want to be with? What would you like for activities during the day? And actually define, and this is true at any stage of life, define exactly how you want to live. Once you define it, then you can see how much it's going to cost to do it. And looking at your available resources, how do you properly structure them to provide you the lifestyle that you want to live?
Speaking of that, one thing, Glenn, it's very interesting because in conversations that I've had with her, in her mind, the how do you want to live part, it seems almost inconsequential because she's so concerned about the financial aspect and whether or not she's doing that part of it correctly. And I have mentioned to her, I was like, well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? What are you looking to accomplish here? And she's like, well, I'll figure that out once I know whether or not I should sell my house right now.
Okay. It's kind of like when people go to buy a car.
Yes.
Most people go about it all wrong. They say, okay, I've got $20,000, whatever it is. They say, I've got this much money to spend on a car. What's the best car I can get? Well, if you take that approach, whether it's $10,000 or $30,000, you're just going to max out and you're going to buy the best, most expensive car you can or the best car you can for the money you've got, invariably at some point you'll be disappointed.
Right.
Because it won't be the exact car that you're looking for. And you just kind of accept it and put up with it. And we're just like we're taught to, just live within your means and accept what you have, rather than choosing all of the features that you want to have in a car. For example, I wanted to have a four-seater. I wanted it to be a convertible. I wanted all-wheel drive. And so, you know what? That limited my options down. It limited my options to, well, an Audi or a Mercedes. Well, I like both. So we ended up with both, but over time. But the idea is you find the features that you want, then you figure out, well, what's the best way to go and get it? And so now if she's looking at, well, I just want to protect my money, really what she's talking about is she wants to make sure her needs are met. She's got the financial security she wants, and there's a good potential. She wants to make sure that she's got something to leave behind. So exactly. we kind of want to ask, well, why do you have the concerns of making sure you have the right decision? What's ultimately most important? Then speak to that.
Yeah.
So when it comes, for example, so if she's going to be moving, it's a matter of, well, where is she going to live? Mm-hmm. Like there obviously there are some simple questions to what you ask, like, is it going to affect her Social Security? No.
Okay.
There. But when it comes to what does she do with her money? Does it change how much she has to take out? What we want to look at is, well, when she sells her house, there's some non-qualified money. That's some after-tax money that she'll have in her hand from that.
Okay, sure.
Then if the rest of her money is in a retirement account, well, when she takes money out of there, it's taxable. So we'd want to go back to managing the cash flow.
Okay.
Where's she going to take her money from?
These are all questions that I know that she has. One of the biggest things for her is, if I sell my house and I take that money, what if I don't want to buy another house? What if instead I want to, rent a place for a while? There's a lot of questions as far as, am I going to get taxed on what I get from selling my house? And does that count as income for against my retirement income for that particular year, against things like Social Security, against things like her other account assets and things like that?
Well, it wouldn't count as income for income tax.
Okay.
The only potential is a capital gain. However, there's a certain amount of money that you can have in capital gains on a primary residence when you sell it that you don't have to pay taxes on.
Okay.
And there's an exclusion amount. And then even still, depending upon what her income is, she still may not even have to pay capital gains tax. Okay. So rarely does that present itself as a real challenge when selling a primary residence.
And what's interesting is that these are very, 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 very specific and yet very important questions that I know that she has. And it's kind of that situation where it's like she's not wanting to be taken advantage of, so to speak, when it comes to the whole process. Because listen, all of a sudden you end up with a few $100,000, let's say, and it's kind of like, okay, what do I do with it now? It's kind of like the person who might have won the lottery and everybody's coming and asking for their piece, so to speak, and you kind of get taken advantage of because people are like, hey, you need to give me money for this, or you need to give me money for that, and I think that's her biggest concern. And it is one of those situations where I do wonder if maybe she should be focusing more on the, how's this going to help your life, and how's this going to, what are your choices, and what are your thoughts on, the way that you want to live, and less necessarily about the money aspect.
See, it's interesting. Like a house that you own that's a residence, it's always a liability. It's not an asset.
Right.
Because an asset puts money in your pocket every month. The liability takes it out. So the house that you live in is always costing you money until you sell it. When you sell it, now the proceeds become an asset.
Right.
However, once you sell your house, you have another problem. You need a place to live. And so therefore, when we look at the proceeds from the sale of a house, those dollars in the past have been earmarked towards providing shelter.
Sure. So
now we have those dollars to provide shelter for, in your mother-in-law's case, the rest of her life. Right. And so where would they be best spent? And, in my opinion, they're best spent providing the kind of shelter or the place where she'd want to live that would be what she wants.
Right.
And she's got that discretion. She's got that ability to say, this is how I want to live. Then it comes a matter of, well, do you want to rent? Do you want to no longer have the expenses or the headaches of having to care for a home? Or does she still want to have that piece of, that house of her own.
Is there ever a situation where someone who is in a situation like hers, let's say, maybe it's not the best financial advice or financial decision to buy another place? Instead, it's maybe better to rent just based off of what your monthly expenses are and things like that.
Well, yeah. Well, let's look at it this way. Not everybody should be a landlord, right?
Right.
So now, if you're just getting into the rental business and you're handy and you can do plumbing and electrical and carpentry and you want to do, and you're okay with getting that phone call in the middle of the night from the tenant, well, this isn't working. And if you're that kind of person that can handle those things, well, you know what? Maybe being a landlord's not a bad idea.
Sure.
Then there's people that don't know which end of the screwdriver to hold on to. And maybe they don't even belong owning a house.
Yeah.
And so that's why the ownership can be overrated.
Gotcha.
So it has to be the right fit. And that's why, so renting, and oddly enough, you think about owning your home. I was having a conversation just this past week with some people that were doing work on a property of mine. And I was pointing out to them that you can't own land anyway. People that own their house, the house is paid off, they think they own it. They don't.
Right.
The government owns all land. So stop paying your property taxes. You find out who owns your house. So in a way, even if you own title to the house, you're still kind of renting. You can't take it with you. Yeah,
exactly. Listen, this is all great information. When it comes to ways for her to reinvest some of this money, if she decided that she wasn't going to take the proceeds from selling her house, what are some good avenues for her to look at as possibilities to take, say, $200,000 and maybe invest it in something else other than a home, like reinvesting it in a home, to really help her income chances moving, for the next, let's say 20 years?
Okay. Well, then we have to look at what other assets does she have, and therefore what's her taxable income. If all she has is Social Security for an income, then if she had some tax consequences from the gains, it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
If she has a lot of money in a 401k or other retirement account where she has to she takes big distributions from, well, in that case, maybe the proceeds from the house should go into an account with some tax advantages. So as the money's growing, all the dividends aren't taxable.
What are some of those accounts that she could look at, let's say?
Okay, well, from a tax standpoint, they're either going to be taxable interest, like if you put the money in the bank and it earns interest, you pay income tax on it. Or if you put money in a mutual fund or a stock and it pays dividends, you'll pay income tax on the dividends.
Okay.
Then there's accounts where you can defer the taxes. You put the money into an account. If you're not needing the cash flow, you might as well defer some of the income, defer some of the taxes on the growth. And you can do that with some annuities. That's how they work. They defer the interest.
Right.
Then you could put it into some accounts where the interest is tax free. Whereas if it's paying out dividends, and that's where you could look at, say, even a portfolio with some tax advantages. If you have the time frame and the risk ability to assume some risk, well, then you could get into accounts where, like I said, some of the dividends, maybe 80% of them are tax free.
Oh, wow.
So it would be some sort of compilation between the two of higher earnings up front, maybe deferring some of the interest and taking some tax-free growth now.
It's very interesting because I know that she does work with a financial professional, now. She might talk to that person once a year to kind of like just look at where things are right now with what she currently has. She has said that there's not a whole lot of conversation about what could be different. What are some other possibilities? So this is all really good stuff. More than anything, and I think that if you're somebody listening to the podcast right now, maybe you're in a similar type of situation where you almost, because I think for my mother-in-law in her situation, there is kind of that, well, he's the financial advisor. He knows what he's talking about. So I just follow whatever he says. And I think like most doctors, getting a second opinion, not every doctor agrees with the exact same regimen of maybe medicine, or maybe you need surgery or whatever it may be. You may get a second set of eyes on that just to say, hey, listen, not to say that this person that's been guiding you for a long time is wrong, but maybe there are some other ways to look at it as well.
Well, you've got traditional medicine, you've got homeopathic.
Correct.
And even in those different types of practices, you've got specialties. With doctors, you've got cardiologists and oncologists and all this other stuff. With financial people, it's the same thing. You've got tax accountants. They understand taxes, but they don't know how to manage money.
Right. Exactly.
Then you've got money managers that don't understand how real estate works with qualified money.
Sure.
And so for me, what I like to do is I like to work with all of them, and I know how they work together. And in practice, so that's why, so when I sit down with a client, I like to find out about, well, do they have any rental properties? Do they own, what do they own for stocks or investments or insurance products, or what's their objective on leaving a legacy? And by seeing all the different components of their financial picture, seeing all the pieces of the puzzle here, what I've structured my business to do over the last 20 years was to be resourceful enough to know who is the best in this department, who is the best in that department. And I get wise counsel on being able to put these pieces together. Because I remember in my early 20s, I remember a story about Henry Ford being interviewed. Yeah. Because he was accused of not knowing so much about how the car works, and so they thought they were going to trick him. They brought somebody in to interview him, and every question they asked, he didn't provide a single answer. So when he was asked, well, how does the carburetor work? He says, okay, hold on. He picks up his phone, calls in an engineer. He says, answer this question. And then he said, okay, next one. He said, well, how does the braking system work? He said, good question. He calls in another person. He said, answer that question. What he was masterful of was his resourcefulness. And this is and I looked at that and I thought, you know what? I want to be that resource. I want to know where to go to get information. And over the years, we've been able to identify and build and develop the right relationships with the right people in each of those departments, so I can spend my time investing in and getting to know my clients and being able to coordinate how these different pieces of the puzzle work, so they walk away feeling at greater peace, knowing that every single component of their financial picture is cared for.
I love that, because I think for many people, there is the situation where you may have a financial advisor, a retirement planner who is kind of looking at things, and they may have their own kind of specific things that they kind of like to go to, so to speak. It's kind of like we like to go to the things we know the best. And sometimes you kind of limit yourself when you only know these certain things, these 3 out of 10 things. You know them very, very well, but you don't know the other 7 hardly at all. And so you really kind of don't necessarily go over there much, because you're maybe not feeling as knowledgeable. But what you're saying is that it's more about having people who do know about these other 7 things to kind of help put all these things together for one person's situation.
If all you want to do and all you're attracted to is to continuing to do what you're familiar with, that's what makes a horse run back into a burning barn.
Yeah.
And so we've got to be able to stay current as to what available opportunities are, because things change. That's what I said. The financial road, it's a lot more dangerous than it used to be.
Right. There's a lot more involved. There's a lot more there's a lot more risk when it comes to bumps in the road, so to speak.
Right.
Very good. If you are someone who is looking at this, and maybe you're listening right now, you may have a family member the same way I do. You may be in this situation yourself, and you're trying to figure out, hey, should I sell my house? Or hey, should I move here or move there, or whatever the case may be? Reach out to Glenn Johnson and the team there at Jabez Financial. You can go to the website at jabezfinancial.com. Again, that's jabezfinancial.com. And make sure that you are listening to all of the different shows that we have on the Manumet podcast, because there's a lot of great information, and maybe it's not specific to today's today's episode per se, but chances are we're going to talk about, or we have spoken already about something that you are kind of in the process of dealing with. You can get all of these episodes at themanumittepodcast.com, and you can subscribe there to make sure you get notifications of when new content is coming out. And Glenn, thank you so much. I can't wait to talk to my mom or my mother-in-law and kind of let her know, hey, listen, there's a lot of different options out there, but you got to find somebody that can really kind of educate you on where to go next.
Yes, Jeff, it was great talking with you, and I hope that you and your mom make it a great day.
All right, sounds good. For next time, we will talk about all kinds of good stuff when it comes to your future, what to do with your money. This is the Manumit Podcast. I'm Jeff Miles. Glenn Johnson, financial professional. We will talk to you next time.
Investment advisory services offered through Jabez Financial, LLC, a registered investment advisor firm. Registration is not an endorsement by securities regulators. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance products, including annuities, offered through Glenn Johnson, Connecticut Insurance, license number 4628409. The firms are separate entities. Annuity guarantees rely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company and are not offered by Jabez Financial, LLC. Read your contract for restrictions, limitations, or penalties. Jabez Financial, LLC is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if Jabez Financial, LLC is licensed in your state, please call 860-390-0093.